Yep. And what surprising things have happened since you've been an on-air talent? I mean, when you put picks up there now, it's for the world to see. It's on Twitter, it's on Facebook, and all the social media. So it's no longer like I think like knuckleheads like me can say I think the 5 horse is going to win the 5th race, and if it doesn't, it's no big deal. But you have an audience, you have a following now with this.
Yeah, it definitely has made me way more decisive than I ever have been. I've always been one of those people like, oh, where do you want to eat? Oh, I don't care. There's this or that. So now you're like locked in with things. And it could be, some days you're going to be, in this industry, you're just like designed to fail. I feel like you're going to be wrong way more than you're going to be right. So you're just hoping like, oh man, I hope nobody saw that terrible pick I did. And then when you get like an amazing exacta, you're like, did anybody see that? And then there's nobody saw it. You're like, well,
it's
whatever.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's why, when you and I text and you're like, what do you think about this horse? I'm always hesitant to be like, I really think this horse is going to do well, because they make liars out of you. They
do. Yeah. You can't trust them. And I hope by now that I'm not like slapping bands of money down on your horses, but I'm more trying to figure out, do they actually have a shot to win? Do I need to put them in my pick 5? That's what. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And you've had some really good tickets of the pick 5, especially of towards the end of the championship meet.
Yeah. I've been getting a little hot with that. So it's fun. I like, and we bet, like, that's the thing. Like, we don't just put them out and don't like, I do. I mean, and Brian does as well. And Ron will always play his long shots. Ron probably has the best ROI because his long shots, they're like, I don't know where they come from, and then they win. And I don't know where they come from with that either. But
right. Well, I give him all my long shots. I tell Ron the long shots. I just tell you.
Thanks. Yeah. All right. I see how this works now. Yeah.
So you're going to have a great card coming up on Saturday. It's really the last big card of the championship meet. There's all kinds of Oaks and Derby preps and stakes for older horses. It's got to be the kind of card that like you crave, right? As an analyst.
Oh yeah. It makes it a lot of fun. Now, I will say it's a lot of work, especially like the maiden grass races. And you're going back and watching like, okay, does this horse look like a grass horse? Did he just come out of the bridle completely in this dirt race? Like, you're going and you're watching, and the maiden races take me way longer than the stakes races do. Because the stakes races, I kind of remember. I remember those races. And then I try to keep notes of, or my favorite races are the maiden grass races.
Really? Okay. Why is that?
Just because I feel like such a big problem with a lot of trainers is they're running the horses on the wrong surface. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's like, finally you're like, just been waiting, like, oh yes, finally this horse gets on the grass, and you're just like,
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Mm-hmm. Well, and there are so many, especially during this time of year, there's so many good turf trainers. I feel like that are, just starting to get their horses cranked up, whether it's Chad Brown or Clement, the Motts. I mean, they're starting to crank their horses up for this time of year, for the spring, the summer. So when you look at a race, like let's take a typical maiden race at Gulfstream Park on the turf, it's anywhere from half siblings to champions to, $500,000 purchases. And some of them are running for the first time. Some of them are trying the grass for the first time. How do you weigh which horses you feel like have the best chance? Are you looking at pedigree? Are you looking at who's campaigning them? Or or is it a whole combination?
It's a bit of a whole combination, but I will say 2 things I throw out immediately is if you are sired by Union Rags and if you are sired by Gun Runner and you're running on the grass, it's an automatic toss for me.
Yeah.
It's just like the statistics are right there. It's like they're like 8% turf routes. Come on, stop running them on the grass.
Right, exactly.
So that's things that are just like I automatically will toss. And obviously, there are some things that will surprise you. But if they just have like one previous dirt, because my motto is like the turf will always be there. So you have to run them on the dirt for the first time, unless it's like a king or just like some random, like, other sire, like, I don't know, all the grass, but the turf will always be there. So when you run them on the grass 2 times and they the dirt times they don't fire at all, then you put them on the grass, but you can just see it in their races. And you can see this too when you're watching them. They just come completely out of the bridle. A lot of them will just completely spit it out, and they can look like they're running a good race, but you can just tell that moment. And a lot of horses will do it as soon as they break from the gate. They just spit the bit. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I'll try to watch for that. Pedigree, I'm not as sharp with, and thank God for DRF with that, and it helps. And then the price of horses, I always say this, they don't know what they cost.
Right, exactly. Well, and the nice thing about the industry is that not only don't they know what they cost, but price does not necessarily dictate talent. As unfortunately we've all learned, but otherwise the richest guys, and richest people in the business would always win because they would always be able to afford them.
Exactly. Yeah. Unfortunately.
And then do people tout certain horses to you, or is it most people are pretty close to the vest with firsters?
Well, I don't listen to tips.
Okay.
For one thing, because everybody, unless it's something very credible, you're one of my credible people. Yeah. You've got a pretty good opinion on your own horses. So there's only certain people that I will, and I could probably count them on 3 fingers.
Wow.
Yeah. Of credible. It's amazing how, and sometimes you just, it's tricky sometimes because the trainers don't know what they're running against.
Right.
Some days, so you could think that you don't have a horse that's any good at all, but you're like, hey, Jonathan, look at what you're running against. And you just don't know because you don't have time to look at that stuff, Right. And when I know the horses, I could but I'll listen to it. If there's somebody that was like, oh man, this horse got loose and ran 3 miles flat out at Palm Meadows 2 days ago. Right. Okay, I'll take that into consideration. But
right. Yeah. I noticed that you guys also say a lot, especially for unproven horses, you'll say, watch the tote, watch the board. And you and Brian are very, very good about mentioning that. So when you see a horse that's 8-1 in the program on the morning line and when they're entering the paddock is 2-1 or 3-5, that's got to be a huge indicator, no?
Yeah, it is, especially those double will pace, because there'll also be horses that are the reverse. They'll be 2-1 in the program and they're 8-1 in the paddock. That doesn't mean they're not getting bet. They just haven't been bet yet. And those 3-5 horses, somebody could have just laid down a really big front money bet on. So when you look at the double will pays, at least that will give you an indicator of probably who's going to go off the favorite or who they're playing. And we always try to look at that because I know it's frustrating when you see him in the paddock and you're like, wait, this horse was 15-1 and now he's 4-1. Why? But it's just the money hasn't come in yet. So
right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk a little bit about 2 of the big races on Saturday. We'll start with ladies first. We'll start with the Gulfstream Park Oaks. Ironically enough, it's on the dirt, but ironically enough, there is a Union Rags and there is a gun runner in there. Even though you said you wouldn't play them on the turf, which is why I think they're in the Oaks, right?
Yeah.
So when you have a chance to look at this group of 8 or 9 horses, did any of them stand out in your mind, or do you remember a signature race from one of them where you kind of kept that in the back of your head and said, this is what I have to focus on for going forward?
Yep. So I've been waiting on a horse. And that's Ways and Means for Chad Brown. They've been pointing for this race all year. This has been penciled in. And I thought in her last race at Saratoga first off, when she broke her maiden, nobody won like that at Saratoga in a maiden race. I was extremely impressed. And then the race coming back after that, I thought she would win, and that bright work just, put it on her. But if you watch Ways and Means works, especially the big work, not this week's work, but the work before, it's on XBTV. Chad Brown keeps some heads up in his works and is very good at just keeping them within themselves. And they, on the gallop out, now at Payson, there's a big bush in the way. Right. But if you keep watching past the bush, they ask her, and she's a big fill. She's got a really big barrel to her, but I like the fact that she carries a little bit more weight because at least she's, she just looks hardy. She worked really good. Right. Really good.
Yeah, and for the audience that doesn't know, Ways and Means was a practical joke filly, a homebred of Klarovich, which I think is really interesting also. Won, at Saratoga, you mentioned she won by almost 13 lengths in a hand ride, even though she was bumped in the beginning of the race. posted a 90 buyer, came back 4 weeks later and just missed as the favorite in the Grade 1 Spinaway, and then has been out since Labor Day weekend. So this is a big ask, in my opinion, to have a 2-year-old turning 3 to go from 7/8 in August and September to 8.5 furlongs in almost in April.
It is.
But you must feel very confident of the way the horse is training.
Yeah, I'll be able to tell more when I see her in the paddock if she looks like 100% tight. But I just think the fact that here's the thing, if she won this race, I wouldn't play her in the Kentucky Oaks because I think she's a 1-turn horse. I don't think she's a true kind of 2-turny. But the thing with the Oaks here at Gulfstream Park, it's a mile and 16th. It's a short stretch finish line. And those horses, that are like her, that I think might be kind of sprinty. And I'm not talking like 6 furlong sprint, but I think that they can get away with it there because of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it seems like that's been the benefit of the Practical Jokes, is that they're explosive. They're really good early. They're primarily, sprinters, but the negative is, they just haven't been able to get that second turn in. And I remember Prank, when she broke her maiden so impressively at Saratoga, and then was never able to come back because she was just so explosive. And that's what Ways and Means kind of reminded me of. But I think you're right with the short, entryway going into the first turn. It almost is like a exaggerated 1-turn race.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially at Gulfstream, you can't, and those short stretch races, you can't deep close out of that. You just don't have enough ground. So I think she can, be explosive from the gate, set a good position, and then be able, to steal the deal. But I think that can be deceiving for a lot of people, like you said, with Prank, because you think like, oh man, I might have a 2-turn horse. Well, technically you did 2 turns, but you're probably not a 2-turn.
Right. Yeah. You're not a distance horse. And then let's shift gears to the Florida Derby, which will be the last race on Saturday. I'm not going to be insulted if you don't pick Hades. I think it's a tough race. But what are you looking for in that race? And how do you see that the Florida Derby is going to develop?
Oh, I'm so excited about this race. Like, I feel like I like the fact that it's a little, like last year we had Forte, which was exciting because we thought like, wow, we're actually going to have a Derby winner. Well, we did have a Derby winner, but it just wasn't, it wasn't Forte. Right. And I know so many people, like I've seen on Twitter, like, oh, the Florida Derby's an allowance race at Saratoga on a Saturday. But like, look at the horses as a whole that we have right now. It's like, unfortunately, this year, we just don't have that kind of stock of horses. So everybody that's here, they're legitimate. So I love the post position for Hades. I love the post. Yep. I know you're excited about that too, because I think he's got enough just natural speed to just be a part of it early. And man, just everything. And I'm not a new Hades fan because I've bet him every single time.
From the beginning.
Yep. And I did pick Fierceness in the Holy Bull, but I remember I was standing on the scale house. I said, look, if Fierceness doesn't show up today, because Fierceness was working like a freak coming into the Holy Bull. So it was shocking. Yeah. But I said, Hades is this horse that's going to pick it up. And he showed it. He looked at Fierceness straight in the eyeball and just said, see ya. So I'm still against Fierceness. I think that he was just I don't like City of Lights. I really don't.
Yeah.
I thought that maybe that just like this second crop, like I kind of convinced myself, oh, maybe the second crop is a little bit better or
right.
Or no. Unfortunately, but he just hasn't developed, in my opinion. He hasn't just grown any bigger. He hasn't really just filled out anymore. He hasn't taken that step. This is his race. If he's got to show it this time, if not, I kind of wonder where we'll see him going forward. I would love to see him on the grass, honestly.
It's interesting you say that, because that was one of the conversations that we had internally was, why wouldn't they try him in the grass? And I know for Todd Pletcher, the turf racing is his last resort. I mean, he would really much rather have his horses go on the dirt, maybe even the synthetic. And they joke around on Team Pletcher that if they tell an owner that a horse is a turf horse, it means he's slow, because it means that he's not showing anything on the dirt. But
Right.
I guess, certainly Mike Rapoli's group has had success on the turf. Up
Yes.
to the mark is
Up to the mark. Yeah.
who was a phenomenal turf horse. And he's had others that have done really well on the grass. I could see where that combination would make sense if he doesn't do well in the Florida Derby. But, he's, until I know we beat him, but until proven otherwise, he's still the big dog in the race.
Yeah. Conquest Warrior is a nice horse too.
Right.
Really nice for Shug McGahee. And he's got the local win on the 1.125 mile distance here. And he's a strong horse, he looks like he's got that and I think he's still raw. Like there's still a lot of rawness about him, which is cool to see as well. I wonder how the race will play out for him, because obviously he can't just be way out the back.
Right.
But I think in my tickets, I'm just going to use Hades and Conquest Warrior. Those are just the two and I'm just going to toss Fierceness. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And maybe he will shock us all. But I don't believe it. He's training great. I mean, he looks great. But I don't see it. But and he could shock me, and I would love that. I mean, great, good for them.
Right.
But.
Yep. No, exactly.
Yep.
And it's interesting the way the Derby, the Kentucky Derby now is kind of lining up, because I just heard this morning that now there's a second Japanese horse that accepted the invitation to come over. So It's going to be, even less horses. I was always thinking, without the Baffert horses being eligible, 25 points would probably get you in. Now It looks like there's going to be a couple of Japanese that are going to come in, and there's 20 or so horses that already have earned 20 points.
Right.
That really makes this race coming up, the Florida Derby, as like a must-have. You really have to finish first, second, or third.
Yeah, if you want to seal the deal. And because also on Saturday, there's the Maidan race too.
Yep.
That's essentially an automatic qualifier.
Right.
So to the Derby if they go, and I know some people there that they're going to go if they win to the Derby. So then there's another spot as well. So I don't think it's a 20 points win and you're in anymore, like you said. Yeah.
It really looks like you're going to need to have a few more points, and certainly the Florida Derby is a 200 point overall race. So you would think the first three would get in with that interest. Are there any long shots on the card for Saturday that you want to tout?
I'm trying to think. Hold on, let me just see really quick. This is a card that it's it could be very formful, or it could later could be a little bit chalky. Mm-hmm. I do like I'm trying to find the set for Mark Cassie in the Cutler Bay. That horse ran incredibly well. Do you remember watching his maiden win?
I do. Yep, absolutely. And Mark doesn't usually tout horses that are firsters, because he's just, he's always of the opinion that he's going to get a horse 75% of the way there and kind of get him some experience. And so when you get a horse that wins first time out, whether it was him or Wonder Wheel with us a couple of years ago, you really kind of sit up and take notice, because you say, wow, that horse really has some talent if it was doing it at 75% of its capabilities.
Yeah. And he's just like a monster. Like just the way he just like eats the grass. Like I was watching another horse out of his replay the other day, and this is before we had entered, and I actually put him in my virtual stable, like, oh, if this horse runs at Keeneland, I want to bet him back. And then sure enough, he's in the Cutler Bay. So that's exciting. I'll have to see. I wonder what the rails are at for that race. Let me check for a second, because they're at 10 feet. Okay. Well, I will say this in regard, obviously the further out the rail setting, the more speed favoring, but I just feel like already this grass course just in general has just been a lot more speed favoring. And it is a good card. And obviously we're all so excited for you and Joe and the team. I mean, you have to be like, is this week nervous for you? Like, are you nervous or?
I'm not nervous yet, but I will tell you that this is a really important race for us, obviously, because it's such a big race in the grand calendar, in the grand scheme of things. But I've known Joe for 35 plus years. I mean, I've known him for a long time, and the first time that we were that we broke apart was when he took the private job for Frank Stronach.
Oh.
And, of course, we couldn't tell him not to. I mean, it was just such a great opportunity. And he won the Preakness, and he won 2 Breeders' Cup races and a number of grade 2s and grade 1s for that group. And then when he came back into the public sector, we had already had an established relationship with a couple of trainers. So it kind of took us a little bit of time to get back together. But I give Joe 100% credit because, I gave him a list of Florida breds at that OBS sale because Joe's, predominantly in Florida year round.
Yeah.
And said, what do you think about these horses? And of the dozen or so, he said, there's a couple of nice horses here, but this Awesome Slew, he's the real deal. And if you look at him, you look at his pedigree, the Hades, you say, okay, well, Awesome Slew, he was a miler. But the female side, which I think goes unnoticed a lot, you do a great job of talking about both sides of the pedigree, but a lot of analysts ignore the female side of it. And on that side, you have Boundary and Seeking the Gold and Pleasant Colony. You have horses that, 2 turns as a warm-up, basically, for them. So the fact that he was able to breeze as well as he did and gallop out as strong as he did is what really led us to the horse. But I couldn't be happier for Joe, especially because, he's a bread and butter kind of trainer. He's there year round and has, fills races and wins races. So it's great to see for him and also for our partner, Robert Cotran, who has also been in the business for a long time, but has never really had a horse of this caliber.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's just so fun. And it's also fun because, like, if you watch Hades, it's not like he's the most beautiful traveler.
No.
He just kind of like throws his legs out in front of him, but he does it in a way that you're like, oh, like this works for him.
It does.
Yeah. And so it's cool to see. And his big work was a solid one as well. And I think now it's just in the hands of how everything will set up. And if you run second or third, is the Kentucky Derby a possibility or? Yeah,
I would have to think that he would, it'd have to be close. Like it couldn't be, if Fierceness wins by 20, then it's like, all right, all bets are off. But if it's close and we feel like that he comes out of the race okay, that's definitely what we're pointing towards. It's funny because, and you'll appreciate this from your days at Monmouth. Our top goal obviously is to try to win the Kentucky Derby, but 1A is to win the Haskell, and we've never run a horse in the Haskell because my dad and I've always said, unless we feel like we have a legitimate chance to win the Haskell, there's no sense in running a horse in there just to get the free lunch. It's not something that we want to do. And we're hoping that this is going to be the horse. I'm taking that weekend off. Then I'm going to the Haskell if Hades is running. Wow! All right. Well, that now I feel like we have to.
That would be awesome. That would be so cool.